Hello, everybody. We are continuing with our book on the Egoic Lotus, webinar book, video book, whatever we want to call it, commentaries, conversations. We have worked with a very important tabulation on page 332 and next 333 of Esoteric Astrology, in which we have been looking at the way that the different signs express themselves for the undeveloped man, the advanced man, whatever that actually means, and for the disciple initiate. And we have looked at the way that these different modes of expression would correlate with the work in, i.e. the organization of and the opening and unfolding of the various petals of the Egoic Lotus. So we've gone through Virgo now in our work, and we are beginning with number 17. I hope I didn't say 16. We are beginning now with program number 17, and we're working on page 333. It divides conveniently right there at Virgo, I do believe. Let me just check this out. Yeah, and then we will complete this part of it. Now, yes, right there at Libra it divides, so it's convenient to do half and half. With Libra, and notice the color is indigo, so we do have indigo coming up in the Egoic Lotus, usually in the 3rd, 6th, and 9th petals. Let's see how it looks. Petal number 3, yes, 6, yes, 9, yes. The 3 places where indigo comes up. So Libra probably is involved with some kind of fusion. These are, the Tibetan had a meditation for some of his members of the glamour group, and he assigned them some different colors based upon their birthdays and upon the decanate of their birthdays, and these are the colors that he used. It has been mentioned that these are some of the same colors that the Golden Dawn might have used. Whatever that, however that may be, they are the colors the Tibetan did assign. So he thought them usable, and I find the color indigo for Libra emphasizing its second ray nature, which is hinted at in some of the discussion on the cosmic paths, and also right in this very document before us, where it talks about divine love and understanding. Those are clearly second ray characteristics and not characteristics of the third ray, which we do know works through Libra. So interestingly enough here, we have unbalanced fiery passion for the undeveloped man. And that's going to, well, that's certainly going to fit with the 1st and 2nd petal. If it is instinctual passion, then certainly with the 1st petal even more so. So it's the sex instinct, it looks like out of control. And DK did talk about the difficulties that had occurred with the rampant sex instinct towards the end of Morya, and how that had led to a reaction in Atlantean times, that reaction being a suppressive one, and because suppressive became one of the causes of cancer. But in any case, it is human love. If he mentions the word love, we're going to think of the 2nd petal particularly, because the love instinct, well, the love response in form rises above instinctuality, DK tells us, in that petal. So things are out of control, things are not balanced here. Obviously there's a lot of Mars in it, Mars in Libra, if you will, and the human love response. Now, how far can we say that this goes? Well, petal number 1, petal number 2. By the time we reach petal number 3, Libra is involved, but the balancing power of the mind will be found, I think. It is a cardinal sign, and it's found as the inaugurating sign of the sacrifice petals. It usually, is that correct? Yes, yes. If we begin with Aries, by the time we reach the 7th petal, we have Libra. So that's one of the ways of assigning signs to petals, simply to begin with the very first one. Of course, we can also move backwards through the signs, as men would tend to do in those early periods. We can begin with Aries, go to Pisces, go to Aquarius, and so forth, and we will have some interesting results in doing that, which we will discuss when we look at the petals. We can also even begin with Pisces as the first petal, and DK seems to do that as well. There are different ways of counting. So at least in this human love and unbalanced fiery passion, certainly human love is going to it's going to continue really throughout the petals, maybe weakening some, so the soul love becomes stronger than the strictly human love when in the sacrifice petals. But all the way through the petals of love, I think human love is with us. But in terms of unbalanced fiery passion, we are in the circle of ignorance, in the hall of ignorance, and I think the continuation of Libra in the other petals is more balanced, because there is some balancing effect of the mind in the third petal. By the time we get to the higher petals where Libra rules, we're dealing with something else altogether. When we look at the advanced man, we're weighing the opposites, devotion and aspiration. Well, for so long I used to think that the pairs of opposites had to be on the horizontal level, but then a number of references, including the kind of light which Libra is associated with, it's a vertical movement in that light. And so the vertical pairs of opposites really, I think, are what are meant here. And one is weighing the direction of the personality with the direction of the soul. And I do believe this is happening in the petals of love. There are, let's see if I can find my way there, in a treatise on cosmic fire. If we were to enter that and go to about page, let's say, around 542 or so, let's see, we will have the petal of love for the petal of knowledge for the astral plane. Unfoldment is brought about by the conscious balancing of the pairs of opposites and the gradual utilization of the law of attraction and repulsion. So we're preparing for the law of repulse here, but maybe not really experiencing it until we get into the 5th petal, which is also a scorpionic petal. The man passes out of the hall of ignorance into the 4th petal, yes, where from the egoic point of view, he works blindly. See, the ignorance is ego of the ego. He does not know that the higher ego exists and begins to appreciate the effects of his physical plane life. In other words, what are the causes, really, of what is happening? So he's able more to evaluate. So we see this weighing of the pairs of opposites. That is the reference I was looking for. And we find that happening in the 4th petal very much. As well, this will be going on in the 5th petal, where the scales are finally tipped in the direction of aspiration and devotion and aspiration towards the higher self. So the middlemost petal, although when you start with Aries, the middlemost petal does not come out as Libra, still Libra is associated as the central or pivot point. those two petals particularly, I think, involved in this question of advanced man. Now, there are ways, as I say, to associate the signs and planets with every petal, and it's a good mental exercise to do that, and also just to see how people who were born in doing the work of particular petals and yet born in a particular sign with particular planets can apply those signs and planets precisely to the work that they are supposed to be doing in terms of their unfoldment. Now we move further and we see that balance is attained. Maybe I think this, well, when precisely does this really occur? It's from one point of view, it is the balance between the pairs of opposites. But that balance between the pairs of opposites is a temporary stage, and it's not the ultimately desirable stage, because the balance has to be tipped in favor of the soul, of the higher of the pairs of opposites. So this balance attained can well be at a certain point in the fifth petal, before the ego gets sick of itself, as it were, the lower ego. From another point of view, we can, well, that might be the one we're talking about, the balance between the soul and personality. Of course, maybe we can talk about a kind of fusion between the soul and personality occurring at the time of significant soul infusion at the ninth petal. Usually that's the point where we consider the individual to be the soul-infused personality, though there's still a bit more to go as we move towards the fourth initiation. When it comes, though, to divine love and understanding, they do not fit with the first balance attained. The first balance attained is the balance between the demands of the higher self and the demands of the lower self. And one is not completely filled with divine love and understanding, otherwise one would have definitely chosen the other. One would have definitely chosen the higher self rather than to try to maintain a kind of compromise between the higher self and the personality. So this divine love is growing with initiations. The Libra petal signifies the taking of the first initiation, at least work within it, organization within it, signifies, it's petal number 7 here, signifies the taking of the first initiation when the fifth petal completely unfolds, and no doubt the sixth petal is affected by that as well. So we have to do that organizational, stimulating work within the petal, and then the rod of initiation is applied, and I'm sure that that contributes to some degree of opening of that seventh petal. So this then will be very important, this seventh petal, in terms of divine love and understanding. It's the movement towards that. But that movement really continues, and it continues all the way into the synthesis petals. Because when you think about the synthesis petals, they are derived from Buddhi. And Buddhi is the source of divine love on the cosmic physical plane. It's one of the sources anyway, along with the monadic plane. So, and Libra, being an air sign, will be powerful in this. It will probably be the sign connected with, well, there's the question, which should be which? Whether the first petal should be Libra and the second Gemini, or the first Gemini and the second Libra. I tend to prefer Libra as the second petal associated with divine love in a higher sense. So Libra will achieve a kind of loving balance or marriage between the ego, higher ego, and the personality at the ninth petal, which is the symbol of, which correlates, this unfoldment correlates with the third initiation. And then it will continue, bringing about increasing balance with triadal energy and soul energy. Libra, after all, rules the spiritual triad, and has a lot to do with the incoming of divine will. So Libra will be active, obviously, beyond the point when the egoic lotus is incinerated. However, in the first ray smashes it, the second ray over includes, the third ray accumulates, the fourth ray harmonizes it out of existence, the fifth ray perforates it out of existence, the sixth ray immolates it, that's the fiery death, and the seventh ray uses the magical words to dissipate it. But in a sense, it's going to be a fiery consummation one way or another, and finally. So, okay, so that looks like that Libra will be important in terms of instituting the divine love, which is coming in at the first degree, in which a lot of work is done in Libra, so that's the seventh petal. And of course, Libra is very much connected with the first degree from other points of view. Buddhi may be entering the egoic lotus in a strong measure, and Buddhi may be applied in love through the personality, but also Libra is ruled by Uranus, and therefore we have the transfer of the sacral energy of the sacral center towards the throat, where Libra has much to do because it is ruled by the third ray also, and the third ray finds its place of expression, one of its places of expression, at the throat center. So let's just say that as the egoic lotus really unfolds, the power of Libra to blend and merge the soul with personality increases. And Libra has this high function of drawing the Geminian twin, soul and personality, together into a fusion. Libra relates the two in Gemini. So we can see its place at the third degree when there is a real marriage in the heavens. Now, Scorpio, I've tried to make its color that kind of crimson color, a darker red, sometimes blood is scarlet red, sometimes it takes on the darker appearance. Maybe it depends on whether it's arterial or venous blood. Anyway, Scorpio with Mars is associated with blood. And, well, there are some pretty dramatic things said here regarding the undeveloped man. Unity of selfishness, the monster. Well, the man has pretty well, we can see, become his dweller. But in a way, he doesn't become his dweller till much farther in the developmental process, even in the eighth petal associated with Scorpio. But let's just say that the man knows no difference in the period of ignorance, working in the hall of ignorance. So instinctually, he is selfish from the very beginning, and he is grasping for himself alone. He knows no better. So this unity of selfishness, at least, can be related to how the man works within petal number 1. Some degree of love of others begins to come in petal number 2, and some mentality in petal number 3. So maybe there's not such a complete unity of physical instinctual selfishness as would be found in petal number 1. But when you call someone the monster, well, that is an aberration of nature. That is a distortion of what nature intended. We're not talking about the natural man. So by the time we become the monster, I would say we have to be in petal number 5, where the man is deciding upon a life of dedicated egoism. And we might almost say that petal number 7 is involved because it's a Libran petal where decision is made. And the kinds of decisions made in the 7th petal promote the opening of the 5th petal in the right way. But if a man refuses to, so to speak, kill the lower ego, and if he remains unified in his selfish intent, it signifies that the wrong kind of decision is being made up there in the sacrifice petals, that there is a refusal to sacrifice, and the man is in process of becoming his own dweller. So the monsters among the human beings are often very intelligent, and they are egotistical. I'm thinking of well, there's all kinds of people we could talk about, but you think about the Marquis de Sade, and he had this great intelligence, but he was extremely cruel in its application, and extremely sociopathic. He enjoyed the pain of others, and that is one of the things that can be attributed to Scorpio when the ego, lower ego, hardens and a person feels no commonality or sympathy with others. And I suppose that if you think about it, people are working in the eighth petal. They take the second initiation, and yet they veer off towards the left-hand path. And I suppose there too, that scorpionic petal can be the scene of some activities which would give the man the title the monster. If we're talking about some kind of brainless Godzilla, I don't think we're talking about that here. A monster is a definite perversion of nature, and generally in the earlier petals you don't find that. When a man is becoming an individual and twisted and distorted, that's when you find those kinds of perversions. So we can see then that even what is said about the undeveloped man will extend somewhat into activity in the second tier of petals, because the man has intelligence, but he's simply focused in the lower chakras. DK talked about the tremendous power that such an individual could have if he was working through the ajna center and yet focused as well through the sacral center, basically using his higher powers not in a selfless way, but in enlisting also the lower powers and directing those lower powers in others, manipulating those lower powers in others. Well, we come to then the, let's see if I get this done correctly. We come to something higher in nature. We come to the fighter. And again, there is none of this crimson red in the Egoic Lotus, but we can find places here where it will express conflict with duality. Well, the real conflict with duality requires the recognition of duality. And that is recognized within the second tier of petals. It's particularly the fifth petal here where I think there's a real conflict with duality, where the man begins to sense the higher self in quite a brilliant way, and yet he's very strong as a personality. So here he has to become the fighter on behalf of on behalf of the soul. This is interesting because it will involve the sixth petal as well. It's the second initiation where Scorpio is particularly applied. It's applied at all the initiations, first, second, and third, but it has the reputation of being most associated with the second initiation particularly, and the fight with the emotional nature. So we read about the many lives of conflict which are associated with the fifth petal, and we realize also that Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, as three water signs, can be, I think, quite conveniently assigned to the astral body and to the love petals which are associated with that astral body. So once in the fifth petal, I'm not sure how much fighting goes on in the Cancerian petal. It's more kind of coming to terms with the pairs of opposites and realizing that indeed they do exist, and maybe trying to do some building in the light of those pairs of opposites. But by the time we're at the fifth petal, we're either fighting against the soul or fighting for the soul, depending upon the period of development we're talking about. So duality is vividly realized, and we have to fight there, interestingly enough, Leo being a materialistic sign, we have to fight with duality concerning the physical body, sex, money, and comfort. Those are the battles that are fought out in this Leo Scorpio petal, and hopefully one is fighting on the side of the soul. When we get into the sixth petal, and we have taken the first initiation, then the fight is with the emotional nature. So there's a lot of this conflict going on within the eighth petal and the sixth petal simultaneously. If the choices are done correctly and the masterfulness is demonstrated in the eighth petal, then the sixth petal will unfold properly, and one will have the second degree initiate. The duality is vivid, and one finds one must fight. One is still in the Martian phase here. One can understand how strong Mars will be with this monster. I'm remembering they didn't look so good in War of the Worlds, you know. They were kind of green, which related them to the third aspect, and definitely from Mars, and definitely deadly with respect to the human family. When it comes to Mars as the fighter, it's being used in a more noble cause on behalf of the soul. So the soul is the warrior, and one is identifying more with the soul in this conflict. Now also, there has to be a battle on the mental plane as well. And this battle on the mental plane refers more to petal number 8, and it's all part of the process, I assume, of achieving the second initiation, because when there is sufficient mentality, one can understand what the emotions are doing, one can understand the traps in which fear, hatred, and ambition lead into. So this is the overcoming of fear, hatred, and ambition at the second degree with the application of the mind. And the mind is active in two ways, we are told. In one way, it does overcome, in Scorpio, in one way it overcomes emotions. Just look in the Scorpio chapter of Esoteric Astrology, and you will find the dual uses of the mind. But also the mind is the illuminator, and the illuminator is helping to overcome illusion, and that is battle on the mental plane. So a lot of work is going on in this eighth petal. Eighth petal work refers to the second initiation, but continued work in the eighth petal after the rod of initiation has been directed or applied will contribute to the overcoming of illusion. And thus it is in the ninth petal as well, where the true, the disciple is still in the eighth petal, and of course Scorpio is paramountly the sign of the disciple, but the initiate is consummating the opening of the ninth petal, and it is a Sagittarian petal, and interestingly enough, illusion is overcome there. When you combine Gemini, which in its lower aspect with Mercury is the producer of all kinds of lying and illusion, Sagittarius is the intuitive sign of truth, and it is this intuition which is going to help dispel illusion in the ninth petal. But there's still work going on in the eighth petal to overcome pride, separativeness, and cruelty. These things have to be overcome when the mind is being mastered at the fourth degree. So we can see that even after the application of the rod of initiation, there's going to be the eighth petal will not be completely open. It will require further work, whilst there is work going on in the ninth petal to get that larger intuitive point of view which overcomes illusion. We have to remember that Sagittarius rules the higher mind, but it also rules the intuition which begins to infuse the higher mind. There's quite a difference between the formulations of the higher mind, which might be correct or incorrect, and the intuition which is always correct. So when intuition infuses the formulations of higher mind, then we are really going to be overcoming illusion. Now that's only one phase of illusion, we do have to realize. As DK says, it's only at the ninth initiation, a number of completion, that we actually do overcome illusion, and in that respect we divorce ourselves from the cosmic physical plane, which from a certain perspective must be considered a plane of illusion from a cosmic perspective. And with the brothers of the shadow, the Black Lodge in the cosmic sense hanging out on the cosmic astral plane, there must also be some delusion to conquer on the cosmic astral plane, but those things are way beyond our consideration, and we'll leave them to such great beings as the Christ and the Buddha, who probably have quite a bit of interplay with the cosmic astral plane, and maybe can even go there, so to speak. Maybe the initiate of the 7th degree can go to the cosmic astral plane. DK said that he doesn't know what's there because he hasn't been there. But then when he was writing, he was an initiate of the 5th degree, and the Christ is the initiate of the 7th degree, and or pretty much complete in that, and so is the Buddha. It correlates with the Egoic plane, but there is the inference that the connection with the cosmic astral plane is also possible, especially because the 8th creative hierarchy, which says veiling the Christ, and which has a lot of Neptunian energy, and Christ is Neptune, has not yet made its way onto the cosmic astral plane. Yeah, so, okay, higher unity, the disciple. Unity is appreciated, isolated unity is understood in a preliminary sense, and that is with the taking of the 3rd initiation with the unfoldment of the 9th petal. There's a lot of work still being done in the 7th, 8th, and 9th petal as the 3rd initiation is being taken. Sacrifice in terms of knowledge, in terms of love, and finally in terms of will. So that when the 9th petal unfolds, all of the final tier unfold together. I say final of the 9, not counting the synthesis tier. And what is said then of it? Scorpio stages the release of Leo. Well, we've talked about that. The king is sick. The king is dead. The lower ego in the 5th petal is perishing, and one realizes that who he thought he had been is insufficient to contain his real identity, which is a higher self. But if we go further toward the 4th initiation, we can judge that Scorpio is helping to destroy the causal body, which in itself is the Leonian sunflower. When the causal body is destroyed, the major blow against Ahamkara is achieved. Ahamkara is that limiting sense of I-ness. Well, all the way through from the time of individualization, we begin to have the sense of I-ness. We may not really grasp it in any sort of tangible sense until 3 million years later, but as we continue, the sense of I-ness grows and grows, and by the time the causal body is destroyed, the sense of I-ness has to, the limiting sense of I-ness, of being some sort of encapsulated ego or ego, has to go. But then you kind of wonder about all the greater beings, and they do have ring pass knots and a certain sense of what they are, and do they have any kind of ahamkara on a cosmic level that also has to go. So lots of fighting going on at the 5th petal, lots of fighting even going on at the 6th petal in relation to the 8th petal, which is ruled by Scorpio. But by the time we really are moving toward the 3rd initiation, well, do I want to say the fighting should be eliminated? A certain kind of fighting between what is the soul and what is the personality in the lower sense, yes, those things can be eliminated. But there is a kind of final battle that occurs in the 3rd petal. And it involves Mars and Vulcan. So the higher unity is eventually achieved, but not without that fight between the soul, solar angel, higher ego, and the dweller on the threshold as a completed unit. I mean, if we're completing something at 9, then the dweller too is completed at the 9th petal, and there's going to be a battle in order to achieve the higher unity. This is a battle that the high disciple has to engage in before he really becomes the initiate. Well, what I've discovered, having a lot of third ray, I like to turn things every which way and look at things from every possible angle. Not every possible angle, but as many angles as I can think of. And when I do, more comes to light. I used to wonder about Sagittarius and the ninth petal, and of course that sign does belong there, and more has come to light as I have been doing it this way about why that's appropriate. Of course, also Aries is appropriate at the ninth petal as well, as I've explained earlier, in terms of the third initiation being an entree into the world of being with which Aries is identified. But in terms of overcoming illusion, both Aries and Sagittarius are involved. The jungles of illusion dissolve in flames, and the path stands free. The path to what? Well, Aries is the beginning of everything. It can even be the path outward bound towards other planets and constellations when the initiation of decision is made. You almost always have to look at two things. If Libra rules the initiation of decision, then maybe its opposite, Aries, has something to do with it as well. And so does Sagittarius, being the sign of great journeys. Well, that was a little fugue off to the side. With Sagittarius, self-centeredness, the eyes are fixed upon oneself as the center. Oneself is the target of one's perceptions. And one tries all different kinds of things. The experimental, or some would even call it the reckless, Sagittarian approach. What I think we have here in the Hall of Ignorance is man, the hunter, trying all different ways to find the satisfaction of his desire. This would be particularly active in the first petal, and in the second petal some kind of vision may appear, and one is hunting after the first expressions of beauty, perhaps, and the mind is being focused in the third petal. But the old saying about Sagittarius, willing to try anything at least once, So there's a lot of errors, mistaken paths, connected with Sagittarius as you try one approach and then another. But finally, one hits upon the approach that works. And that, of course, involves the sixth ray. We try different ways, and we kind of become devoted to those ways, only to find out that they are disappointing. We try other ways, and eventually we find something to which we can really be dedicated and devoted, and it actually works. The self-centeredness quality is interesting. Sagittarius brings in the fourth ray with its reputation for self-centeredness, and also the fifth ray helping to stabilize the mind in the third petal, and the sixth ray, which is involved at the second petal. And I think it's very strongly orienting towards something higher, even though it be a fairly formal type of otherness, spirits, God, whatever. Believe in something, even though that something is hardly abstract in these early stages. The color for Sagittarius is blue. It's rich blue, it's called. I don't know about the color here, but we do have a kind of a rich blue or a blue at least, in the second petal, where the process of probably belief in something other is rising. Although we could even say that in the first petal, since it's quite Lemurian, and the man still has maybe a better connection with his inner God than he did when he lost it later in Atlantean times, there can be belief in the solar angel, belief in that inner God, the feeling of the inner God, and animism comes in here as well. So the religious sense, even in the most material ways, has been with man almost from the beginning. As a matter of fact, maybe before he finds himself, which is going to be sometime here in the first petal, because it only takes 3 million years, only 3 million, before the individualized man comes to himself. By the time before he finds himself, he may be oriented towards immaterial otherness. He still has a certain sense of immateriality. We have to remember how much Sagittarius is connected with the very first petal, because it was the arrows that shot forth from the bow that individualized man. It was the solar angels going into extension and pervading themselves, arrow-like, pervading man, arrow-like, with a certain fragment of themselves. And yet they still remain greater and higher on their own plane. Is that plane the Buddhic plane? Some say it is. Others might take these beings even higher than the Buddhic level. DK says we will never, at our present stage of knowledge, solve the mystery of the solar angel. He says it's just too complicated and too veiled. But I think we can see the hunter at work here, primitive man. I was looking at some of the pictures of the Vedas of Ceylon in the early days. Maybe these pictures were taken 100 years ago, I don't know, and they were with their bows and arrows and in very primitive conditions, and they were passing through the hunting phase, where lots of experimentation is needed. Otherwise one doesn't live. One will not capture one's prey. One will not achieve the object of one's desire. So it's in the attempt to achieve the object of one's desire that all of this experiment has to be employed. Well, the errancy of Sagittarius, the recklessness, the shooting arrows in all directions, many of them simply in error and useless, ceases, that errancy ceases with the advanced man, who becomes one-pointed. Now he knows where he's going, and he directs himself forward as an integrated personality. Here's that kind of connection again, I think, between Cancer and Sagittarius, which I talked about earlier. They both have the Jupiter connection. There's different ways of looking at them. You know, when Jupiter is exalted in a sign as it is in Cancer, and when it rules the sign as it does in Sagittarius, you can use those exaltations to link the signs. So they are linked in the fourth petal with let us say, the Sagittarius as well, bringing in the fourth ray as it does, and Cancer, of course, bringing in the fourth ray via the moon, and it being the fourth sign, so having a resonance with 4. They are linked there, and we begin to pull ourselves together there as an integrated personality. The integrated personality elemental, or at least, integration. The integrated personality elemental has everything to do with the sign Cancer. It's all under one roof. You know, pull it together, the many conflicting forces, pull them all together under one roof and make them one. Even on that lesser stage, the whole is seen as one. And Sagittarius, that alignment, straight through mind, emotions, and body, with the fourth elemental, which integrates them all. So when DK talks about Sagittarius in Esoteric Astrology, he says a lot about the integrated personality. So I think we're going to find this one-pointedness beginning at petal number 4, and a more directed approach. And as the man gets ever more intelligent and creative and expressive, it will be very powerful. Sagittarius is linked with Leo as a fire sign and will be operative that way. And then let's not forget what can happen in petal number 6. In petal number 5, the Sagittarian color is there, and the colors of the 6th ray are there. Blue from the 6th ray angle, and also rose from the 6th ray angle. But by the time we get to the 6th petal, we are potentially becoming the probationary disciple, learning how to be the one-pointed disciple. We may not be that entirely yet until we manage to take the first initiation, but we certainly are straightening out our objectives. And a lot of fanaticism, I judge, can be found in relation to the 6th petal, where you are seeking to purify the physical vehicle, the emotional vehicle, purify the mind, and direct it all forward. So the directed approach applies here, and it is the approach of the personality aiming to reach the soul, aiming to become in closer contact with the soul, even to become the soul eventually. Then finally, we have a high kind of development here, a man with great vision, having tried so many ways, he knows what works, the director of men. We could almost say directing them towards initiation, and the controller of the gate of initiation. It's as if you have to fulfill certain requirements, fulfill a certain vision, integrate yourself in a certain way, and then you can be allowed to pass through the portal of initiation, and in this case, the portal of initiation, I think, is very much the third. Now, there is a place in the books where Sagittarius is connected specifically with the first initiation and the second initiation, and all of the kind of one-pointed aspiration that is needed for those two initiations. So that definitely works in connection with sacrifice petal number. It's number 7 and then number 8. Both of those petals can be the home to that kind of Sagittarian one-pointed activity. The man is definitely at that point the one-pointed disciple. He has taken the first degree. Excuse me. And once he has taken the first degree, he's definitely the one-pointed disciple. But to become really the director of men, you have to have great wisdom. You have to have that which the whole life experience has given you, a degree of completeness you have to have. And you have to have the intuition working as well. So the 9th petal, to me, which is the Sagittarian petal, allows the individual to become the director of men, and perhaps he is assigned some task in saying when men may pass the second degree and pass the second degree to the third degree. The rites of passage are found here with Sagittarius when you can move on. And so even in terms of the rites of passage, it works at an early and primitive degree, then socially later in the second tier, and then in the third tier in terms of the rules of initiation. Rites of passage, the man passes through them, but the laws concerning them come from the hierarchy. Well, okay, so does Sagittarius shoot its arrow into the petals of synthesis? Yes, because there the intuition is required, and also the Antikarana meanwhile is being built, which is the way into the spiritual triad. And when we reach that stage of projection, it's kind of like spiritual artillery here. We are shooting the arrow into the arrow of consciousness into the realm of the spiritual triad. So within those synthesis petals, the intuitive understanding of Sagittarius can be applied, and of course even beyond the destruction of the causal body, when thinking of the paths that the man will take at the 6th initiation, when he takes one of the 7 or 9 cosmic paths. Sagittarius is ever going on and beyond, widening its horizons. The disciple becomes the savior. Sagittarius, the disciple, and he is the one-pointed disciple, will one day, and it will have to be really after the destruction of the... Well, a man like the initiate Jesus can be very much the savior at a certain level. The real Christ, beyond the level of the causal body, is a savior in Pisces in a much wider sense. It's Jupiter operating again, which unites these two planets. They are both ruled in an orthodox sense by Jupiter, and the arrow of Sagittarius is found in the Plutonic arrow of Pisces, which is, the sign Pluto being the upward pointing arrow. And it's also connected with Sagitta, the arrow, which is found in the first decanate, or in relation to the first decanate of Capricorn. This question of relating the extra-zodiacal constellations of the decanates. I think Nicholas Nillen has done a lot of good work on that, and whether there's an absolute one-to-one correspondence or whether the entire sign is the beneficiary of the energies of all the three constellations associated with it, well, I think both are true. There tends to be kind of a one-to-one correspondence, but not exclusive. And any one of the decanates in any sign can be the beneficiary of any of the three constellations associated with the sign. But that's another subject, and we went into it, with fair depth in the commentary on the Esoteric Astrology book. Okay, so what do we have here? I want to see if I've left anything out. Of course I've left something out. Of course I have. But what is it? Anyway, there's an indigo color that can be associated with Jupiter and with also with Sagittarius, especially with Jupiter, I think. So the blueness and also the rose of that ninth petal seems to be very appropriate for Sagittarius, where we are really preparing to shoot our way into the spiritual triad. That is what can happen, and we can begin to polarize our consciousness increasingly within the spiritual triad, and the evidences of what transpires within the triad are ours during the Antikarana process, the later phases of the Antikarana process. We're reaching with the Antikarana the realm, excuse me, the realm of intuition. So the full opening of the Egoic Lotus at the third initiation of the 9 petals gives the Sagittarian entree into the petals of synthesis, and with its really broad perspective of the higher Sagittarian, there's a lot of ways to connect Sagittarius with synthesis. I suppose we really ought to find all the signs in the synthesis petals. We know we're going to find the air signs. That's the air is God, as it is said. But we will also find Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. But we can also find the way that synthesis is achieved with the help of all the signs, and that would be quite a task. It's something that initiates between the 3rd and the 4th degree would have to know something about, as they begin synthesizing knowledge, synthesizing love, and synthesizing all the different types of will. Okay. All right. Let us continue. You know, there's always more to be said, but everybody can come up with his or her own approaches here. So that it is all light cannot be delivered in one approach. I mean, The Secret Doctrine is a magnificent book, but it's just the ABCs of the ageless wisdom, and even Cosmic Fire, you know, and all of these written either by a master or by an arhat or in conjunction with a master. And it's just giving a certain amount. Hopefully something that can be useful. How can all this be really useful? Well, okay, we are all struggling forward towards emancipation, if we can call emancipation a kind of a 4th degree experience, no longer bound to the wheel of rebirth, no longer needing to incarnate. And there are just certain things which dharmically and karmically we must do in order to facilitate the release from the wheel and to facilitate our service work, helping others to release themselves or take their next step forward. And wouldn't it be great if there was an astroradiological science which helped us understand precisely what it is that needs to be done to take that next step in the planned fulfillment of the causal body. And, you know, to do this scientifically, to do this with real understanding instead of just sort of blundering our way into whatever the next thing might be. A real clear vision of the precise types of activities to be undertaken and the manner in which they should be undertaken and the duration of their undertaking and so forth. I believe that work with the qualities and nature of the Egoic Lotus and its tiers and its petals will help us do that, especially when we combine the study of the Egoic Lotus, which is basically our history in terms of a flower, in terms of a great display of energy. When we combine that with a detailed knowledge of astrology and the rays and the initiations and the centers and so forth, in a way it's all esoteric psychology, not only the therapy of it, but the understanding of the beings in whom we live and move and have our being. So sort of the wider theosophical perspective that is found in those who are members of the 8th or psychological seed group. Well, here in green is the color of Capricorn, and it's pretty clear from the, well, it's connected with the 3rd ray, but also with the 7th. 7th is violet, but and also with the 1st, which is red. But its connection with Saturn here is what's being emphasized. And the 7th ray is an aspect of the 3rd, though related to the 1st. So in a way, the violet and the red come together, but violet is also an aspect of the overall green color. Well, the earthbound soul. What shall we say? The earthbound soul, could there be any soul more earthbound than the one who is taking incarnation? He's taking incarnation in Cancer, and as I said, the opposite sign, Capricorn, should be utilized. In other words, whenever you have a sign which seems to be the predominant ruler of the petal, if there is such a thing, then we also look at the sign opposite it for interesting information about how that process is meant to go. And certainly this individual in the first petal is the subject to the school of hard knocks. He learns by breaking the law. That's Saturn. That's Mars. But he learns what the law is. That's Saturn. And with Capricorn, Saturn is the ruler and Mars is exalted. When something is the ruler, it doesn't mean that its energies will be used only for good purposes. And even when it is the planet is the exalted planet, it only means that it's powerful. It doesn't mean that it will be used necessarily for morally good purposes. DK talks about India, ruled by Capricorn, as being a battleground down the ages. We can imagine, I believe I was consulting with Philip Lindsay, and he was telling me that he felt that there was a great plain, maybe it was called Kurukshetra. It was south of Delhi, where Delhi is now, and that's where the great war in Atlantis involving Krishna, Arjuna, and all that, that's where that took place. So a battleground down the ages. The 4th ray personality of India, I don't know how often it's changed. 4th ray is not associated with Capricorn, but Mars in Capricorn for battle is very prominent. So the earthbound soul, how long does the person stay, the earthbound soul? The first, the petals of the first tier are easily associated with Earth. Here we have Capricorn, the very first one. It's the inverted mountain, right down into incarnation, not the mountain of initiation, which is up above all of the usual elemental experience. No, this is a descent into the depths of the mineral kingdom. Capricorn, and then Taurus is very fitting, and we'll discuss why that should be so. And then comes Virgo. The 3 earth signs fit very well this first progression from cardinal to fixed to mutable, from the instinctual physical to the emotional to the mental. It fits well. So he simply says the earthbound soul. And how long does the soul stay earthbound? Well, throughout the tier of knowledge which is the hall of ignorance, there is an earth-boundedness, because what reveals the earth? Earth is revealed by the senses, the lower senses, the lower five, and man is very subject to those lower five senses during that period. So even though he becomes more emotionally responsive and more loving of form and more intellectually capable in the world of form, he still is earthbound throughout that entire process. But in terms of the primitivity of earthboundedness, that of course is occurring in the first petal, to which at least I'm giving a particular connection to Capricorn. Yes, which I connect particularly with Capricorn, to get the English correct. Sometimes, you know, when your tongue gets ahead of your brain here, and later when you're listening to it, you say, oh, did I say that? And you know the grammar much better than the way you used it. But in the flow of things, it was said that way, and that's one of the liabilities of this way of delivering information, but there are other maybe advantages if one has the patience to listen and to look. Okay, then we get to advanced man, one who crosses the water, fluid. Well, what water are we talking about? There's a lot of water to be crossed in the second petal, even to get a mental grip on things. Water is, as far as I can understand, the astral plane. And you have to cross the water. Of course, there's higher types of water. You know, there's any type of matter is water, so we might want to cross the water into the higher worlds of the soul. And with all of the 18 subplanes being considered water and matter at the same time. But here we have to learn to become mental in our nature, and so even though it's the advanced man, we can also talk about the water of the second petal, where the man begins to develop the emotional response, but especially, let us say, the petals of the astral planes, or the petals of the astral plane. In other words, the love petals. These I have assigned to water, and they are the love petals of the astral plane. So there's probably a good reason to assign them to water, wouldn't you think? And the one who crosses all of those waters and finds himself in the hall of wisdom. So to think of Capricorn, the most rigid of all the signs, as fluid, is a little strange perhaps, but there's a lot of adaptability in the third ray and in Saturn, which, third ray characterizes Capricorn. And its color green, the color of the third ray, the adaptability seems to be there. So a type of fluidity which allows always coming out on top, you might say. Some sort of success, some sort of conquest over circumstances as one continues to rise by being fluid and adaptable. So I'm looking at this in a way as the one who crosses the waters of the fourth, fifth, and sixth petals and moves beyond duality altogether, moves beyond the sense of an identity that is torn by duality, moves towards oneness. The top of the mountain, to me, is oneness. There's only one point at the top of the mountain. At least if we, consider this in an imaginative way. Really, a point has no, well, don't get me started, A point has no dimension at all. So here we're looking at this virtual mountain, and we imagine that there's just one peak point on top of it, and yet it's really a dimensional cipher. But in terms of the way we conceptualize things, we can say that, yes, there is but one point on top of the mountain. So the color green is operating here, but also the color violet is operative with the seventh ray of Capricorn, and no real first ray, as I said. These first ray signs are not represented with any true first ray color. Orange, because the fifth ray is connected with the first, and because orange is said to be an exoteric color of the first ray, well, the closest we come here really is the orange. So the one who crosses through this sphere of duality, where oneself is realized as two things in the process of becoming one. When we're working on the love petals, we have not yet reached the realization, the identificatory realization, that we are one, and we are absorbed into the one, and there is but one into which anything is absorbed. That's more realizations that are cultivated in the sacrifice petals, and even, even better yet, beyond the existence of the Egoic Lotus at all, we will have isolated unity of the Master. So, all right, so the one who crosses the water, not just the astral plane, but also the central petals on the way to the petals where unification can be realized, and the conqueror of death. Death is always, for the disciple initiate, due to separation. Death is due to separation. And death is a matter of consciousness, a consciousness which cannot be expansive enough to contain different vibratory locations. So there seems to be separation of one thing from another. But when the consciousness expands sufficiently, then all that was divided by apparent barriers of consciousness is comprehended in one unifying consciousness. Thus man conquers death. Of course, there's also a lot of physical things that can be done, and rising above materiality at will. When is one really the conqueror of death? Well, you could say that one is certainly learning how at the third initiation. One is initiated, and it says initiated. But since there's so much death in the fourth initiation, and so much necessity to leave behind the elemental worlds completely, the dweller being overcome, I would say that death is really conquered at the fourth degree. And of course, interestingly, Capricorn is said to be associated with all the 5 first initiations. Can we take it beyond that point? Well, it says all the 5 initiations Capricorn is associated with. And, maybe beyond in higher ways that we, at least that I do not realize. But certainly the first 5 initiations, and particularly associated with the third initiation, where it says here, initiated, and also, I would say, with the fourth initiation, where death, through the means of death, death is conquered. And through an elevation above any necessity to be reincarnated, death is conquered. As long as we do not have to enter that sphere of limited consciousness and can be alive, awake, and alert in a very holistic and inclusive way, as long as our consciousness is not confined, we are conquering death. Now, there's all kinds of deaths, and on it goes, and even the greater beings experience some kind of death, because their consciousness is certainly not ultimately universal. The consciousness of our solar logos does not contain the entire cosmos. It's much more limited than that. The universal logos has conquered death completely, as its consciousness is every possible where in the universe, and that consciousness cannot be excluded from anything. But then, is it excluded from the absolute? And is the ultimate conquest of death its reabsorption at the universal pralaya into the absolute? That's the question. Okay, Capricorn consummates the work of Scorpio. Well, Scorpio is really active at the second initiation. There's a great battle going on for control of the astral body, but there's one more step to be taken, and that's the third initiation. So these great battles in this dualistic sign, Scorpio, end in the realized unity of Capricorn when illusion is overcome at the third initiation. And you kind of wonder whether we couldn't transpose that up another octave or so and say, well, the causal body is being destroyed in Scorpio, but the realization that comes to Capricorn shows that there is still a higher mountain of perception. than was perceived before within the contents of the causal body. So after the great battle where the two face each other comes the consummatory peak of Capricorn, which is unified vision. You sometimes see people take those panoramic shots, the camera goes around like this. Suppose they were standing on top of the mountain and they would go take shots all around the mountain, and then it would all be laid out as one united whole. Well, that would be some little analogy to the unified vision that can be seen from the mountaintop. It's as if you have eyes in the back of your head, or you're just one spherical, all-seeing eye, an eye of Shiva seeing in all directions simultaneously. And that overcomes segmentation, fragmentation, which is equivalent to death. Death and division go together. When you divide consciousness, you have death. If there's any barrier to consciousness, you are dead to the area you cannot penetrate into. And when those barriers are broken down, as they are by the three synthesizing planets, I'm thinking about how Neptune dissolves barriers and how the lightning flash of Uranus destroys barriers. Saturn crushes out the barriers, crushes the walls between things, and yet is the wall between things. Then you have conquered death through that panoramic consciousness which the initiate in Capricorn can achieve. So Capricorn definitely takes us into the synthesis petals. It probably, we from the method of starting at Aries and going through the 12, it rules one of the synthesis petals, and we could call it the synthesis of knowledge. With Aquarius ruling the synthesis of love, universal love. Synthesis of knowledge on the atomic plane, which we can relate to Capricorn through its Saturnian rulership. So there is, and through the third ray, and where that city called all knowledge is found. So it is a very knowing sign and is intimately related to knowledge through its connection with the third ray. Of course, so is Aquarius through the fifth ray. So Capricorn belongs among the synthesizing petals most definitely. It also belongs in all jewel-like structures through its connection to Vulcan and its relation to hardness and crystallization. And so there's going to be a sense in which it is part of the first-ray demonstration of the jewel in the lotus. In many ways, the three first-ray signs can be connected with the jewel in the lotus, but Capricorn has the advantage of being intimately connected with Vulcan, which rules the formation of all jewels. Well, there are just these higher energies of which we have just the tiniest inkling. All are operating in ways unknown to us on levels which we cannot yet penetrate. We can speculate about what those operations are, but we have to be practical and use the astrological signs and planets and rays in the immediate dimension in which we find ourselves focused, so as to master that dimension and move on. Speculation is good. It gives us a certain method of procedure and a certain way to prepare, to anticipate what might be required on above. But if we want to ask, well, what's happening in the jewel in the lotus now, and in what way is it the reflection of the monad, and how am I experiencing that, that might just be a little beyond us. Now we move into Aquarius. I feel, of course, that I'm passing things all too rapidly, but there's enough here to keep us digesting for a while, and we can't know everything. We just can't. And even the Tibetan, who is, well, one of the most learned of the masters, at least the most learned in terms of the astrology and rheology and the creative hierarchies, would, if he were measuring his knowledge against that of the planetary logos, see the huge lack of co-measurement. Obviously, as vast as the Tibetan's knowledge is, and any one of us who's studying his books understands what kind of vastness we're dealing with. What is it compared to the knowledge of Sanat Kumara? What is it compared to the knowledge of the full planetary logos on his own plane, or focused on the cosmic mental plane. You see, it's all relative, this question of great and small. So we have to opt for a utilitarian approach. What can we use, and what, even though we can't use it, helps us use other things? We have to ask ourselves those questions. Aquarius, well, the diversification of Aquarius. But notice it's in the turquoise, which is the combination of the green and the blue, and it has a lot of the, well, it had not only the fifth ray, which seems to be indicated, but Aquarius has that third ray, it's hinted, and its universal love suggests the second ray, and I think that it is the constellation which is veiling a hidden etheric constellation of the first ray. There's some, the bear is associated in one way with the first ray. Aquarius and the great bear and this other constellation, to which no name is given, all connected with the first ray. Well, we usually think of Aquarius as such a sign of altruism and sharing and giving and serving, and it is all those things, but in the early days it also exists, and the person can be still very self-centered and seek to be utterly multiple, seeking to fulfill all roles. If the man for all seasons, Sir Thomas More, had great skills in many, many different areas, there are lesser people who simply try to fulfill a multiplicity of roles in a way that is not very accomplished. And they don't have the centralization to say, well, I am this. This is my nature. I am this, I am that, and I am the other. So it's the beginning of the distribution of self, which eventually will allow it to find the self in all different types of people and circumstances. But at first, it's a bit of a burden because you can't pin the person down as to what he really is, and he himself doesn't know what he really is. So this doing of many things, it's a bit Geminian in that respect, without bringing any of them to any degree of real development, is characteristic of the early Aquarian, diffuse, diversified, and spread about, scattered in its energy. It doesn't seem to have so much connection with the first petal. We could find a way in which it does, of course, but in the community building of the second petal, it has its place, because that is where the magnetism begins to come in, and people gather together into community, if only to save themselves, to survive. So the division of labor in its earlier sense is found there. You won't find the color of Aquarius, not really, in the Egoic Lotus. You won't find the turquoise that the Tibetan gave, but then Aquarius is interesting because it's like the coat of many colors. I think the story in the Bible about Benjamin and the coat of many colors. Aquarius is all the colors and the synthesis of all the colors. When you think about the head center and its great display through the 1,000 petals, you can think about somehow all the colors being present, just the way they are virtually in the causal body, except for the red. So there is the rainbow. That's what Aquarius is all about. The rainbow has entered politics, of course, but it's the idea that all the different qualities are needed together, and that we cannot leave anything out in the inclusiveness of the Aquarian, that where universal love is displaying. But that's a bit later in the day. The burden of the self, well, Aquarius is used to carrying burdens, but at first, selfhood and concentration upon desire and form, bringing all the many things to the person for their own fulfillment, so that the shower of all good things rains down upon the single egotistical person. This is the burden of the self. They use all things for themselves instead of using all things that they have accumulated for others. So in a way, in this third-ray accumulative mode, everything comes to them and they shower themselves with the gifts of all the earth to which they think they have the right. This we can see, of course, in some of the selfish Aquarians. They do exist. I'm looking in politics and I'm just astonished at the number of quite reactionary people who are conditioned by the sign Aquarius. They are part of the elite and they are not accountable to others. It's also a sign of aviation, which allows it to rise into the air to unreachable heights and to control from above. It has a controlling factor in it as well, to control the many. It can also be very selfishly idealistic. So my particular group is the best of all, and it has the sixth ray associated with it in that context. I mean, when we look at Russia, it is ruled by Aquarius, and so communism had that attitude that it alone was the way to save the world. And when we look at the Third Reich, when it came into existence on January 30th, 1933, it was ruled by Aquarius, and the Nazi Party then, with the Third Reich, thought of itself as the one method of salvation, the true ideal for humanity to which all had to conform. So this wonderfully distributive sign Aquarius is not always distributive. It can be very selfish, and it can use all things for itself. I'm reminded, Hitler was a Taurus, of course, and you look at Taurus and Aquarius, there are the acquisitive sides of these signs. He looked at all countries surrounding him and in the world in terms of their material resources, which he was determined to bring back to Germany or to use on behalf of Germany. So all things would flow not out of him, but into him. And we can see how all of the Aquarian energies eventually would do that as well, including the energy of atomic energy, which he planned to utilize for Germany's sake and distribute in a way which would have destroyed all opposition. So in the beginning, before breaking through the Ahamkara, we have this, the burdened consciousness, thinking of itself and all the things that it needs. So desire in form is ruler, and all the things that are desired are brought back to the individual, and all of that creates an inability really to relate in the larger sense. It's a reverse flow. The divine circulatory flow is out and among all for the benefit of each and all. The reverse flow is from all for the benefit, the grandeur, the exaltation of the limited ego. And that can be considered the burden of the self. Even though that self may not have such a strong sense of individualistic center, it does manage to gather from many places what it thinks it needs, so that all the good is showered upon it, and the others are neglected. And rather than being a sign of sharing, it's a sign in which etherically and physically things are taken away from others, so what they need is not theirs anymore. It's a sign of greed in that sense in the early days. Then, so how will that operate? Does it operate much in the first, in the Hall of Ignorance? Well, I think it operates more in the second petal, where, from the positive perspective, communities are formed and people recognize their proper associates. Maybe it has something to do with the tribe as well, and maybe it has to do with exchanges between tribes and so forth. Those are all on the positive side. With the third petal, I think we definitely have to look at it as present. If we begin with Aries at the first, Pisces at the second, then Aquarius is at the third, and going in the clockwise direction is a very legitimate way of proceeding. But here the Aquarian mind begins to focus, and we know that the scientific mind can still be the mind that is ignorant of the higher self. And sometimes he talks about Aquarius and Uranus in terms of concrete science, which is coming in here at the third petal, and is at least helping people understand the relations between things in the world of form. It's not yet really, well, you know, DK talks about when the third petal is used correctly, motivated by the love of the second petal, that we are going to have all kinds of technological advantages which will lift the burden. Think of that, Aquarius lifting the burden through technology for many people. So it can be used there in that way in a positive sense. But, you know, at first we still have the ignorance of the higher self. So we might really call it the burden of the not-self. It says the burden of the self, which is really the not-self, and simply believing in all rationality that that's all that exists. So a lot of skepticism still found there. Interestingly, fifth ray, the skeptical ray, is very powerful in Aquarius, and Uranus can be connected with concrete science. However, we do move into something else. It's dedication to the soul, which begins to be sensed in the second tier of petals. And dedication is, you know, it's kind of a sixth ray thing in a way, but it does show itself in the Aquarian idealism. The soul is sensed, and the wideness of the soul is sensed. That's the wonderful thing about Aquarius, how very broad it can be, because it doesn't know the ring past knot of Leo necessarily. Itself is the many selves. Well, in the early primitive days, one doesn't know who one is. All things to all men, you know. I'm this to you, I'm that to you, and I keep on changing the self that I am. But later, being the many selves is a step on the way towards universalization, isn't it? So the humanitarian tendency is entering here in these socially oriented love petals. And as I said, you know, try to find the opposite of the sign that rules a particular petal, and look at the fifth petal there. The opposite is Leo. So Leo Aquarius can be thought of as being found there, and under the stimulus of the solar angel, we begin to realize that there's more to me than I thought. In my lower self nature, I have a higher self, and that higher self is actually connected in an Aquarian manner with all other higher selves. So instead of having the distinct personalities which are separate from each other, we begin to understand the unity of the many personalities, because the soul, which is the source of those personalities, is one unified thing. So we're taking a step towards universality. And again, you know, when I think of Aquarius, I just have to think of all the colors. I don't find the turquoise particularly, though, you know, in some way, Aquarius and the seventh ray age, I think of the way this group sense has to be manifested eventually in the age of Aquarius, and the violet color would be important. Sometimes white and violet are connected in the teaching. So here we develop the humanitarian impulse, and we understand that we understand from our lofty perspective up in the air with our aviator the difficulties that humanity passes through. And we realize that we really have to be down here in the valley of service, upholding humanity. And that can be realized even before the third initiation is taken. So we realize the soul demands this, and we're pretty well working in the petals of love when we do that. When it comes, then we move on to the true disciple and initiate, and the sense of universality is really stepping in here. In sacrifice is giving. One way to understand sacrifice is giving, even though it may hurt the lower individual. it is going to feed and nourish the expansion of that which we really are. We give. And the petals of sacrifice are all about giving, and so Aquarius increasingly is going to be operative. Can Aquarius be associated with the first initiation? Well, in the sense that the man becomes aware of the group, yes. With the second initiation, there's the cleansing of all of the three stables, the three different levels, but especially of the astral plane, the cleansing of the astral plane. And the waters are what provide the cleansing. So Aquarius is not a water sign, but it is associated with the waters, and it's associated with all the good that the cleansed, purified waters can bring of nourishment to all the different areas. So it is the emotional nourishment of humanity. And then, of course, in the mind, universality enters, and the Aquarian becomes the genius and really knows all things. So here there is the great environmentalist thinking of the earth as the environment. He's not only the server of all men in the petal of sacrifice. When he takes the second initiation, he's learning how to do that, how to really express the plan and serve humanity. But when he takes the third degree, then he really is the server of all men, and Aquarius is a sign which should be much associated with the third degree. The third initiation can be taken in Aquarius, but so can the fourth, so can the fifth, and also the second. The purification of the astral plane in the second, and a less rigid focusing of the emotions, a broader sense of human friendship. In the third degree, the coming together of all the many energies and the realization in the mind of the wholeness of things. And in the fourth degree, a pouring out of everything that one has in sacrificial service to the point of death. And in the fifth degree, great universality, the revelation of the interconnectedness of many things even beyond the planet. So then, remember Gemini. Hercules was walking around, and then he heard Atlas groaning, struggling under carrying the burden of the world. Aquarius is in there too, helping Atlas, the hierarchy, carry the burden of the world. We could say, is he helping the planetary logos? Well, is Atlas the planetary logos, or is Atlas the spiritual hierarchy? I think for our purposes, Atlas is the spiritual hierarchy, ruled by Aquarius, carrying the burden of the world, interested in the ecology of the whole world, not just the welfare of man, but the welfare of all the kingdoms. And we know that Aquarius, in its diversification, is the great environmentalist. Thinking about how all things relate to all things, and making sure that the divine circulatory flow works through all things. So again, it's certainly found in the synthesis petals, and is it found here in the ninth petal indicating the third initiation? Yes, because it conventionally does associate very much, along with Capricorn, to the third initiation. And then the distribution of all these energies from the synthesis petals. It sees things in synthesis, in universality, and therefore is much related to the synthesis petals, and maybe, well, I can see how it can be related to all of them, actually, but maybe the synthesis of love is very important for Aquarius. We learn about the universal love of the developed Aquarian, but it certainly has vast knowledge. All depends upon the ray, and so Aquarius can be certainly used in a genius-like way in the field of knowledge. I don't know if I've emphasized enough the development of genius at the fifth petal. That's what DK discusses in education in the new age, and when that fifth petal is open, the genius can appear. Now, that's not necessarily the most highly developed individual, but it does show you how high mentality can go in relation to the fifth petal. Aquarius releases Virgo from her load. Well, Aquarius has been doing a lot of burden carrying anyway, but Virgo has the load of the Christ, and somehow the Christ is born, and Aquarius is lifting the Christ up into a position where that Christ can be radiatory for all humanity and for all the planet. Both of them are related to matter, quite interestingly. I mean, let matter reign in Virgo, and Aquarius is the lowest of the creative hierarchies, is it not? I mean, look right down here. Aquarius is ruling the elemental lives, the baskets of nourishment. So they are both connected with materiality, but also with the redemption of that which is material. And the heavy material concerns of Virgo are at last lifted up into the air, where Aquarius flourishes. The air is God. And from there, all the values of wisdom and whatever other values that Virgo, of love, of intelligence, that Virgo has been nurturing, are now upheld by Aquarius and distributed to all of humanity. So that pretty well goes along with the this auxiliary phrase we have here under number 6, that Virgo hides the light which irradiates the world in Aquarius. That is the Christ light, and that hiding is quite a job, yet one has to, in a way, make sure that it is of a proper quality. But then it is born out into the world and rises into the air, and Aquarius gives it to everyone. So I certainly think that we can, in terms of the Egoic Lotus, we can just see Aquarius as, just pervading the whole thing. This is the coat of many colors, and there are some places where its higher functions are less obvious. The fact that it's related to the elemental lives will give it a lot of influence in the first petal, but of a different kind. It's the vitality that's needed in this first petal. It's related to the etheric body, right? Aquarius is. So the vitalization of primitive man is found with Aquarius. And later, the waters are flowing in petal number 2, and the community is coming together, and people are attracted into groups. It's operative there. And in the scientific mind, the mind that is investigating all manner of things, all manner of distributed things, it's operative in petal number 3. And we could go on with it. The family is forming, but who is the family? Eventually, it's going to be the family of man. There's that famous book of photographs, beautiful, from 50 years ago or more, called The Family of Man, a very Aquarian gesture. But one can also see the Cancerian nature of it, and the radiatory qualities of genius at the 5th petal. And, we could relate it, we could go on, and we will. We will relate the signs to all the petals. But you get the idea that it is pervasive. It's developing the impulse of giving through the sacrifice petals. It's developing altruism in the 6th petal, where a person tries to be selfless. Aquarius, though it can be very selfish in the beginning, is one of those signs of selflessness, because after all, you're giving it away. It's a sign of altruism, where you're looking out not just at your own Leonian self-centered self, but you're looking at all the others as if they were other selves as well. And that is being cultivated in the Virgo petal, where, we can say that Virgo and Aquarius can be related. And on it goes. Well, I think then we come to Pisces. And Pisces is such an interesting sign. We've been told that there's only, in the beginning, 8 signs, then 10, maybe 11, but not 12. And yet Pisces is the 12th sign, so is it even active in early man? And yet it must be possible to be born in all the signs, even though the zodiac of the time may have only emphasized certain signs. The very first thing that is said on the, evolutionary wheel, so to speak, or the wheel turning clockwise, is go forth into matter. Well, everybody has to do that. And if the very first incarnation is taken in Pisces, well, indeed, it has to be found in even the very first petal. and water is matter, and man is the earthbound soul, subject to matter. So the confusion of being in this new world of matter and of what the senses reveal of the lower worlds is belonging to Pisces. And in the early days, it gives a responsiveness, an indiscriminate responsiveness to everything. Maybe there is more sensitivity in the second petal than in the first, but certainly the Piscean confusion, what do we call, what does he say? Bewildered by circumstances and not by events. That's what we find in the second, I think, human group. Is that what it is? I could go on a hunt, but it's either in one of those early stages of the human groups or an early stage of adaptation, bewildered by circumstances. And that's so Piscean because we know that with Neptune accompanying it for all humanity, it has that a sense of being lost at sea and not really being able to orient itself, having no fixed place from which to reckon and which to begin to judge of location. And maybe in the early environment for early man, it was something like that, and there was a lot of confusion with regard to circumstances. Let's just say that it is a sign of impressionability, and so the medium is brought into our focus. Maybe is the medium intelligent? Well, if the medium is not intelligent, maybe that mediumism is coming even through the second petal. I think there are a lot of people involved in the very primitive religions who are mediumistic. So we can find a connection with Neptune, Pisces, and the second petal, especially if we start counting backwards from Aries to Pisces with the second petal. We're allowed to do that. We're also allowed to count from from Pisces at the first petal, and then count backwards, or clockwise as we call it, to Aquarius second and Capricorn third, and so forth. And we will try to discuss that when we're dealing with each petal and focusing precisely on one petal at a time. So yes, very much Pisces can be ignorant, swallowed by the whale, as it was. Jonah the soul is swallowed by the whale and doesn't really know he exists. In other words, the higher of the pairs of opposites, the higher self, isn't really understood to exist by people who are operating in the hall of ignorance. So it can be operative in the first petal, the second petal, overcome by matter in the first petal, sensitive to subtler things but not knowing what they are in the second petal. And in the third petal, sacrifice. It's a petal of sacrifice, and you do lose your life. You are compelled. Your will is not your own. You are forced to make a living for your family under very dire circumstances. You're forced into the army, or you're forced into battle. There's all kinds of, you're at the mercy of the elements. It can overcome you. But that would be pretty first petal. But sacrifices occur, and Pisces is the sign of sacrifice. Interestingly enough, Virgo is definitely there. It's a Virgo petal. It's a Gemini petal. And we can talk about the sacrifice of Pisces. So we have three of the mutable signs operative there. And maybe, we can probably find the mutable cross there with Sagittarius hunting in the concrete mind for new types of understanding. So looking at the diagram, Pisces has particular connection with the rose color and with blue. I think it will be important in that second petal, but certainly it is vulnerable man. We hear about how vulnerable early man was to the, not only to the elements necessarily, although who knows what the elements were like in those days, but to predation by the animal kingdom. And you kind of wonder, preliminary man must have been very large. Is DK talking about that time when man was of colossal height, and were the animals somehow even greater in their stature? Or is he talking about the time when humanity in later days began to have a diminished stature and was the victim of larger animals. Anyway, vulnerability is the key here. Vulnerability and impressionability go together, but disorientation as well, and not really having the mind to find out the kind of environment in which one is living. Only in the third petal is the mind developing, I think, to a sufficient degree to really understand the environment. I mean, the modern Atlanteans had a mind, but not much. And, you know, in the second petal, we learn about the modern Atlanteans. We also learn that those wonderful, colossal things that were built in Atlantean days were built by impression and directed by the higher directors, and that man himself did not have the intellect to conceive of those things. He was simply impressed by what he had to do, and the impression came from much more advanced beings. So there we have the mediumistic quality of Pisces again. Well, it is a sign of sensitivity. Notice it's in the color lavender. Again, it's not found in the Egoic Lotus, but violet is, and lavender is very related to violet. So it's interesting that things from the subtler planes make their way through via the mediumship of Pisces and become tangible. So if you look at spiritualism as a kind of a religion or a way of interested investigation of the subtle realms, we have both the seventh ray and Pisces together. Pisces and Cancer are mediumistic, and the seventh ray rules precipitation, and the medium is bringing through the subtler thing so that it appears in form via the seventh ray. So we see that in the early appearance of violet, some of the subtler worlds can have come through. I've read stories in some of the theosophical literature about how precipitation from the astral plane was really an ongoing thing. And it wasn't always very savory. It could be like horrible things, monster-like things, being precipitated from the astral plane. And there they did their damage on the physical plane, and then they disappeared. If you read the lives of Alcyone, you'll see that in one of his incarnations, at least according to Leadbeater and Besant, he and his sister, whoever it was, met a very unhappy ending at the in the jaws of one of those precipitated astral monsters. But, you know, the whale is a monster in a way, Monstro the whale, and great things could be precipitated from the subtle planes without much knowledge of what was really happening or what it meant or what its value was. A combination of Pisces, violet, and the seventh ray with lavender thrown in. Then the advanced man, well, advanced man is always going to move into that second tier of petals, right? I mean, that's where we have the possibility of not just being smart, as in the third degree, not third degree, but third petal, but advanced. In other words, it advanced out of the hall of ignorance into the hall of learning. Certainly by the time we reach the end of the hall of learning, man is really advanced. And the pairs of opposites appears to consciousness in the second tier of petals. So whatever soul is, by whatever name we call it, it is registered. And because it is registered, it can be sought after because its advantages are realized. So what we have here is sensitivity to soul. And we can find that in the Cancer petal, number 4, increasingly as the solar angels begin their supervision, their sensed supervision. We can find that in petal number 5, and certainly as the opposite of the Virgo petal, where we are becoming ever more careful about enacting what soul tells us to do in this very practical 6th Virgo petal. So here Pisces is not just the unintelligent medium receiving whatever from wherever and not really knowing what it is at all. It is dealing with the human pairs of opposites and is the means by which the higher of the pairs of opposites can come through to the individual, and also, I would say, on behalf of others. Pisces can mediate the presence of the soul, or that higher type of energy which is non-elemental. It can mediate that to others and present that to others. Again, kind of interesting, because there's a precipitation there. Something that was invisible is now coming through the mediator and is appearing in a tangible manner so that you can sense its presence. Then, okay, so that would be all the way through the second tier of petals. And advanced man, well, we're told that the intelligent medium is found in Virgo. So just think what can be done in that sixth petal, which is ruled by Virgo in one sense and by its opposite Pisces. So the intelligent medium could really appear and be able to explain what is this invisible something that is now tangibly sensed, of which we can be aware, and so forth. Then finally, I'm reminded always of Saturn in Pisces, which the Dalai Lama has whenever I see these words, spiritual responsibility. That's obviously a really strong one for him, and he's a Cancerian on top of it, so the whole is seen as one. We are definitely now into sacrifice, because the only ones who will take spiritual responsibility are the ones that know how to sacrifice. So we are moving towards saviorship. We don't even achieve the full thing in the sacrifice petals. We're just learning the ABCs. We're told in the ninth petal that there is sacrifice regardless of the pain. I quite forget it, but I think it's found on right around on page 823. The will to sacrifice through love on the mental plane and thus to serve, and yes, there it is, and also it is found on page 543. Let's try that. Probably 542. It said. The petal of love on the mental plane is unfolded, and through the conscious, steady application of all the powers of the soul to the service of humanity, with no thought of return, nor any desire for reward for the immense sacrifice involved. So wherever we have sacrifice, we have Pisces. There's self-effacement there. There's giving up of one's central point of ego, in a sense dissolving that central point, and hence related to, we could certainly say related to Leo, where the relinquish point comes in. So no matter what the sacrifice may be, in the eighth petal, there's no thought of wanting return for it, and then the utter sacrifice of all forever with the complete unfoldment of the ninth petal. And you would have to go even beyond that, because the Savior is the deliberate giving of the causal body at the fourth initiation for the welfare of others, and the heart center, which is also connected with Pisces via the second ray, is the center, the object of attention. So he has this spiritual responsibility. He holds himself to this sacrificial task. The great sacrifice, imagine Sanat Kumara in his sacrificial mode, holding himself through Saturn to that spot and not leaving until the last weary pilgrim has found his way home. Whatever scope that pilgrim may have, it's probably a certain group of the human pilgrims that has to be involved. But I don't know. Maybe it's all the life forms until they become human and find their way home. I don't know, but Sanat Kumara stands steady at his Pisces sacrificial post, holding himself there through the power of Saturn. After all, he is, Sanat, and it's a word very closely related to Saturn. So the spiritual responsibility comes in on the mental plane, increasingly, and as the first and second initiations unfold, the fifth and sixth petals, and the rod of initiation is applied to the seventh and eighth petals, at least the stream of energy is applied. Spiritual responsibility is growing. The third degree initiate realizes this is a life for others, and the entire content of his treasury is to be poured forth upon them, and he even has to sell everything he owns, right? That's all the content of the causal body, and give it to the poor. Okay, and the poor see the language which is pictorial parable language. Sell everything you own. It's the content of the causal body. Give it to the poor, and the poor are everybody below you. So pour it all forth, and do not cherish it, do not hug it, do not hold it to yourself and saying, this is what I am and I'm going to increase my virtues. No, it all has to be poured forth. It's very Aquarian in that sense, but it's salvational and Piscean in another. And finally, the entire content of the causal body is completely destroyed and given to everyone by rising in translation into the spiritual triad. So the motive there is to become the Savior, and you don't even really become the Savior until you're at the 5th degree and are ending your history as a human being in relation to Shambhala and not in relation to hierarchy. So the path of the Savior is Piscean, and it relates the man to that statement, not my will, Father, but thine be done. The giving of everything once the will is understood, and one can understand that Pisces will lead on in acquiescence to the 6th degree. All of this is far beyond the causal body, of course. Pisces takes from all the signs. It is the complete synthesis and the most synthetic of the signs, but Pisces and Aries are really one thing in that respect. So the end becomes the beginning, and the beginning becomes the end. But it's found in the synthesis petals, of course. And after, and we can say Pisces gives to all the signs as well, because it has this complete synthesis of wisdom, this pervasive wisdom, and of course love. And it pours it all out, it gives it all out, even after the causal body is completely destroyed and all of its contents have risen into the spiritual triad towards the monad. After all, Pisces rules the monad. What did the monad do? It came forth to help all the other lives. I leave the Father's home, monadic plane, and turning back, I save. So, with Pisces, we go beyond what we can see here in the causal body. We certainly see that there is a lot of this kind of, if we blended the rose and the purple together, or the violet together, we'd probably get some kind of lavender out of it. And it's operative, we see, at all the sacrificial petal level. It's operative in the petals of synthesis, being the foremost sign of synthesis. It's related directly to the monad and its sacrificial journey, and it relinquishes all it has, giving it to all in saviorship. Much, I suppose, would depend upon the ray, but when Pisces is present, there's many ways to save along many ray lines. So eventually it finds its way, we find our way back to the monad, which was the original givingness of the whole monadic journey. Okay, friends. Well, I'd kind of like to hold this 1 to 2 hours if I can, and I think we're just about there. So I'm going to call this the end. I'm calling it the end, right? It's almost my end here. The Waysack is coming. End of program number of Egoic Lotus webinar commentary, program 17. It is 2 hours in length, and it is from Esoteric Astrology 333. And we will begin with something from the Egoic Lotus webinar commentaries. It'll be program 18. I think it'll be on rays and the initiations. It'll be on page 344, where we discuss all the different initiations that have to do with the causal body and their rays and their qualities. So let's see, one more look at our object, our subject. What we have done here is take all the 12 signs of the zodiac, looked at them in 3 different phases: undeveloped man, advanced man, and disciple initiate, seen how these signs are operative in those different phases and seen what parts of the egoic lotus are activated, functioning when these different types of activities connected to the signs are functioning and operative. So I think we've got some idea there. The zodiac is spread throughout the egoic lotus, and when you really look at it, it is a zodiac. It's a 12-fold energy system, but the wheel is coming and going and turning in all directions, 2 directions simultaneously, and eventually in all directions simultaneously, and eventually we're going to have a complete synthesis of all the signs of the zodiac. Maybe that kind of happens when the egoic lotus is destroyed at the 4th initiation. Okay, friends, that's going to be it for now. And we will, Waysack is coming for all of us. I know when you finally get to this, it may be already the year 2045, if it's around then. But there was a Waysack in the year 2014, and that's what I'm preparing for, and I know so many are preparing. So we'll see you then with our next, which will be program number 18, and it'll be on the initiations. Okay. Farewell for now.